All right. Good morning. I welcome you to our October meeting of the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority Trust. Let me find my agenda. We have an item from the chairman, and that's the Union Station update. And, morning.
Administrative Services Manager for Embark, and today I'm going to talk about the transfer of ownership of the Union Station from COPPA to the city. So go ahead, Juanita, you can change the slide. So this whole process was approximately 3 years. Back in July of 2019, COPPA contacted the FTA and let them know that we wanted to release ownership of Union Station back to the city, and it would still be used for public purposes. The process, then the next step was in June 2021, they published the notice in the Federal Register. There were no responses, so the FTA gave us permission to go ahead and proceed with the transfer. In January 2022, the ownership was transferred from COPPA to the city by a quitclaim deed, and the city granted COPPA a 6-month lease to transition out of the property and to a new location and surrender it basically to the city. So from April to June, the admin staff worked with procurement and maintenance staff in Embark, and we went in and inventoried all the property that was on the premises. We moved equipment to storage areas. We surplus salvageable items. We removed the hard drives from the printers and the copiers that were left. That's part of the city policy. Disposed of those, and then disposed of any other broken or damaged items. In June, we went ahead and moved furniture that we could utilize at Embark headquarters that could be repurposed, and then we transferred the remaining furniture and equipment to the city. So this is just some of the items that were left. So in order to transition the 5 remaining staff members that were located at Union Station, our staff got together and developed an interim floor plan to relocate them to Embark. We repurposed a storage area at Embark headquarters, and we dubbed it the core office space. And it took a lot of group efforts with IT, maintenance, safety, and training. But in mid-August, we were able to relocate the finance staff to Embark headquarters. And so finally, after 25 years, the whole Embark staff has been united on site at Embark headquarters. I believe Mr. Dickens there, he's our federal assets and grant coordinator. He had been working, the only place he ever knew was Union Station. So, and he's been working for the city, I think 27 years now. So it's nice to have everyone together again. So with that, I wanted to recognize all the staff members that assisted with this transfer. And when I like using this phrase, it takes a village, and it truly does take a village. There's over 23 staff members that helped between our admin staff, IT. We actually shifted some office space, so staff members moved. We consolidated spaces, but all of them came together to help make this a successful transfer. And Mr. Jesse Rush relinquished the keys, I think, in September, early September. So we're happy. I think everything went rather smoothly, and I can't wait to see what the city does with it. Thank you.
Thank you. What are the city's plans, kind of?
So the preliminary plans, actually, I think final plans and specs are advertised now for bidding for construction for a remodel, beautiful remodel. The Scissortail Park Foundation will operate the Union Station as a part of Scissortail Park.
All right, do we have any citizens to be heard? If not, I would have us review the minutes of our September 2nd meeting and any changes or additions. If not, I have a motion to approve.
Something's happening. I move to approve.
I second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes. All right. Our consent docket, several items on there, and I think Jason was going to make a comment about maybe A and, what was the other one, C?
Yes, sir. So item A is a resolution authorizing the application of some surface transportation block grant funds through the process that's managed by our MPO, ACOG. And just wanted to remind the trustees that this has kind of become standard for us. Over the last probably 3 to 4 years, we've been able to apply, and we've successfully competed for some of those funds to purchase buses. We've been awarded some of those funds for traffic signal priority technology. And so again, we're just continuing to try to leverage what is really kind of a new funding source for transit in the region. So appreciate staff's work on that. They always do a great job getting us prepared. And then item C, again, I know this is pretty familiar to the trust, our continued partnership with the planning department, where the planning department allocates some of their CDBG funds for the purposes of providing transit for those in our community with low income. And just thought it was a good opportunity to recognize that collaboration and that partnership with planning. Without that allocation, this program would either not be possible or it would be significantly reduced. So,
All right. Any questions by the trustees on any of the items under our consent docket? If not, I'd have a motion to approve. Motion passes. All right, thank you. Our consent docket, item A is to ratify and approve an addendum number 1 to the professional services agreement for mobility data management. Jason, any comments on?
yes, sir. So this is a professional services agreement with, I'm looking for it here. I want to make sure I say it right. Mechatran, thank you. And so we're really excited about this agreement and working with this vendor, because really what this agreement will do is put us in a position really for our next generation of trip planning and basically customer interface software. So what that means is thinking of the technology that we have now, this trust will remember we implemented that back in the 2013, 2014 time period. And although it served us well, as we know, it doesn't take long for technology to become antiquated or there to be better options out there. And so this is really our efforts as staff to continue to upgrade our technology, upgrade our customer interface. And the other thing this will do is it really sets us up for success regionally in terms of combining not only different modes of transit for trip planning purposes or for customer information, but it will also allow us even to combine different transit providers. And so, for example, looking, out ahead and thinking of the possibilities of what the RTA could bring to the region for public transit, what other providers like CityLink and Edmond currently bring to the region for transit. With the appropriate partnerships and agreements, all of those different modes and providers can be integrated into one, basically, trip planning or customer interface. And I know that that's something the trust has mentioned before and staff has echoed, that as a customer, if you're wanting to use public transit, you probably really aren't too concerned about who the provider is. You just want to know how to get from point A to point B. And if it means you have to use multiple modes and multiple providers, it should be easy to use. And so that's really what this sets us up for. The other thing it does is it automates a lot of the processes we have in place. Our planning team, our operations team, and our IT team, every time we have a change in schedules or we have a new sign up for bus operators, for example, to sign on to different shifts and work, there's a lot of manual process that goes into that. And so this software should help reduce that as well. We'll point out that we started this process back in March. The board approved an RFP at that time. It has obviously took us a while to get to this point, but want to recognize staff for all of their due diligence in really having some significant dialogue and understanding of what the vendor is going to do for us. Because as you'll notice, it's a sizable investment in our future. The first year cost with implementation is estimated to be about $273,000. Ongoing costs, years 2 through 5, will be about $124,000. Now we'll capture some savings because we will no longer need our current system, but nonetheless, it's a significant investment, primarily funded through our federal formula grant. So happy to answer any questions.
Simplify what mobility data management. I know you explained it, but
Yeah, I struggle with that one. But you know, essentially the way I think of it is this is basically a system where all of the different software that we have within our agency and even software that resides in other agencies can talk together. And then that way the customer really just has one place to go to plan their trip.
okay. Any other questions? Not, I'd have a motion to approve item A. Motion passes, thank you. Item B is ratify and approve an addendum to our contract with the Brt Construction for Prairie Surf Santa Fe parking skywalk repairs. There was a long article in the paper about that the other day,
Yeah, so thinking of this item and the construction project, probably back up and remind the trust that we had some extreme cold temperatures in the winter of February 21, or in the winter of 21. And as a result, our facility here, the Skywalk, along with other facilities, obviously, and residences throughout the city, you know, we ended up with a lot of water damage, flood damage from frozen pipes. And so the Skywalk, the pipes within that Skywalk froze, caused a lot of damage. And we've been in a position where we've really been working with risk management, been working with the hotel, Santa Fe parking garage, all these stakeholders that kind of have an interest in the Skywalk. As you'll recall, at one time, it served a function for COTPA in that it connected to the Santa Fe parking garage that we owned. Well, obviously the trust doesn't own that parking garage anymore, but we still basically maintain the responsibility of that asset. And so we're really in a position where we need to repair that Skywalk so that we can then be in a position to hand that Skywalk off to either the current owners of the Santa Fe parking garage, or maybe a combination of the current owners of the Santa Fe parking garage and the hotel, because it's really beneficial to those entities, not so much the trust. So we're working through that. I think it's important to point out that working with risk management in particular, you know, one of the things we conveyed is although this project will be funded initially through our parking reserves to enter into the contract with the general contractor and make the repairs, we do anticipate being reimbursed just as if it was a claim. And the significant thing about that, and what we decided early on in trying to figure out how to fund this project, was, the skywalk doesn't really serve a purpose now for the parking system. So to invest parking dollars in the skywalk, it's more advisable to basically treat it as a claim. So we do expect to be reimbursed from either risk management or the general fund, or a combination of both with this. So the bids, we received 2 bids from Globe, one from TCS, and we're recommending award of construction to Globe.
Now, Prairie Surf Studios, that takes the skywalk all the way down to the old Meridian Convention Center.
It does, and I think, and I'm glad you asked that, because I want to make sure it's clear. COTPA is just responsible for the connection from the Santa Fe garage to the hotel. That part of the skywalk will remain open and functional once this construction is complete. The second half of, if you will, of the skywalk that goes from the hotel to Prairie Surf Media or the old Myriad, that has been and will continue to be closed down. Not accessible to the public, and that's because Prairie Surf Studios is not open to the public.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any questions of any of the trustees? Then I'd have a motion to approve item B. All in favor? Motion passes. All right. Item C is a report by the Selection Committee on the consultant selection for First American Museum Riverboat Landing.
Yes, sir. So this item here is basically authorizing staff to negotiate and enter into a contract with Team Design. This will be the A&E for the landing at the First Americans Museum, and also serving the development that is down there, or going to be constructed next to the FAM. And so you probably recognize the language here in this memo, but anytime we go out for an architect, engineer firm to help us with a significant project, and keep in mind this FAM landing, as we're calling it, is a significant project funded by, approximately $4 million worth of grant funds, and then some additional local match. We go through a consultant selection process that Public Works helps us with. And so we went through that process. I believe it was Studio Architecture and Team Design that proposed. Did interviews with those 2 firms, and the selection committee's recommending Team. So once we negotiate that, we'll bring a contract back for the trust to consider and hopefully approve. As far as timing goes on the landing itself, once the contract is awarded, we plan to basically be in design kind of over the next year. Construction could start possibly late fall of 23, the winter of 24, kind of that time period. And then we are working directly with the developer, making sure that our project syncs up to theirs so that the landing is open and ready for service when their development is complete and comes online. In fact, we had a representative from that group on the selection committee, so we're trying to work very closely with.
So there won't be any service till all that's accomplished and built.
Right, but I think it's a great opportunity for a trip generator along the river.
But we're not providing any service down there now, because
No, sir.
Barney reminded me the museum is open, so,
Yes.
okay. All right. Any questions? Then I'd have a motion to approve item C. Motion passes. Item D is amendment number 1 and change order number 1 to the Northwest Bus Rapid Transit Center downtown, providing service north of North Classen Boulevard and Northwest Expressway.
So as the memo indicates, this is our first amendment and change order to the BRT project. I know the trust is familiar with how these projects go, and it's not uncommon to have amendments and change orders as you get into the field and start actually building what's been designed. And so here we are with our first amendment and change order. The amendment, as described in your memo, is basically related to changes in quantities for items that were included in the contract. The change order, on the other hand, are costs associated with basically construction varying a bit from what was designed. And in this particular instance, the change order, which you'll see, is about $153,000, is related to the platforms. If you think about the streetcar platforms, how at the very edge we have those, what we refer to as truncated domes, to alert individuals, and especially individuals with visual impairments, that there's an edge there. The original specifications had a paver. We believe we are better served with the truncated domes, and so the change order will allow us to put those truncated domes in place versus what went out with the specifications. The other item that's included in the change order is some electrical work at the transit center. As you'll recall, we have a BRT platform at the transit center. During construction of that, some of the electrical was not marked correctly, so we're having to make some repairs to the electric that serves the transit center. And then finally, as described in your memo, there was a change related to the water line betterments. If you look at the total here, though, the change order is $153,000. The amendment is about $73,000. We have a total increase with the amendment and change order of $226,000. But again, combined less than 2% at this point of the original contract amount. Now, we're several months into the project. We're obviously optimistic and glad this is our first change order to this point, but just again, thinking of the future and expectations as we get further and further into the project, there's likely going to be additional change orders, and we'll bring those, of course, to the trust for consideration.
I've been kind of watching on the platform by Penn Square, and it looks like the platform's about finished. When do we anticipate putting up the rest of the structures?
Yeah, we actually still have some platforms to construct.
I know that, yeah.
And as far as the railing and the pylons will come closer to the end of the project. And Jesse's going to provide a update on the BRT, and he can probably get into a few of those details, but I don't know that we're like date certain on, for example, when the pylons will be delivered, but definitely more towards the end of the project.
Okay. Okay, any questions on item D? If not, I'd have a motion and second. It's been moved and seconded. Motion passes. All right, our next item is ratification of claims and payroll. And are there any questions by any of the trustees on any of the payroll or vendor claims? If not, I'd have a motion to receive. Motion passes. All right. Some of our financials, schedule revenues and expenditures.
My voting isn't.
Yeah, the voting was weird. Yeah. Can we vote on that again? It just disappeared before I could even vote. Yeah. When that sort of thing happens, I always just assume it's me.
Well, let's have a voice vote on that. Well,
Here we go.
okay, here we go, maybe.
It's weird because everything came up at the same time. I think so now. I mean, the screen's still showing the voting, but we did vote. There we go.
There we go, all right. It's been moved and seconded and approved. All right,
Technology. you
there
gotta
we
love
go. No, you gotta love it. What's wrong with just raising my hand? I vote yes. All right, our financial reports.
Well, good morning, Mr.
Morning.
Chairman and trustees. Sorry I missed last month. I will say I was disappointed to not be here to kick off the new fiscal year on our financial reports, but duty called as a mother. So I'll just get into it on period 2 of our fiscal year. How about that? August of 2022. But before I do that, I actually wanted to introduce you all to our new financial services manager, Ms. Trudy Melson here. And so she started with us just this week, and she's going to do a great job. She is going to be in charge of our whole finance section, and so she comes from the finance department with the city, the accounting services division. We also have another person I'd like to introduce to you while I'm at it, is our new trust specialist from, also from the finance department, the budget office. Don't worry, I think our trend is coming to an end here on capturing our very talented folks from finance. Thank you, Brent. But
But we like having advocates.
isn't it nice? Isn't it nice to see some familiar faces? So she's our trust specialist. And really the admin team has been growing quite a bit as we're supporting the growth of the organization. I'll also point out a new face at the front here, Miss Juanita Sanchez. She's one of our new office coordinators. She just recently started. So between the hires that we've had since June and the ones that we're processing right now with recruitment, we've had about 9 new administrative support positions coming on board across like IT and marketing and planning, et cetera. So we are growing, and we're here to support the growth of the organization.
And you didn't leave them at Union Station, you brought them with you too.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
You
hear that.
you didn't leave them at Union Station, you brought them down there.
That's
and brought
right,
them.
that's right.
Okay.
We're excited to have them together. It's wonderful seeing them every day. So with that, I will dive into our financials. So on page 2 is where I'll begin, which is our transportation operations. So as I like to do, I'll point your attention to the total revenue line. You'll see that the year-to-date revenues are just over $7 million in this period, and that's about 4% above what we had budgeted. And I'll point out that it's an increase from our prior year, you'll see there, and it's largely due to our general fund subsidy increase and the increase in fare revenues. So our fare revenues are up 24% from prior year. And then if you go on down the sheet here, you'll see a row that says total expenditures. Those total expenditures for this current period is, $1.4 million. Oh, no, I'm on the wrong line of my notes, $5.6 million, which is 4% under budget. And then our overall operating income, which is the line right below that, is $1.4 million over what we had anticipated. 1.4 million, 53% over what we had anticipated with our budget. And then I'll highlight a few things on the revenue lines in detail. So about 9 lines down, you'll see a description, federal grants, and we talk about this pretty much every month. But I'll point out to you, you'll see a negative variance of $637,000. And it's really just kind of the same story we've been sharing, which we're leveraging our CARES funds, and we've leveraged our ARP funds to help us reserve some of those formula grants for our preventative maintenance draws. But I will say that our CARES reimbursements, we're actually going to be taking our last draw this month in October, so that in the coming reports, you'll be hearing about that being the last of the CARES draws that we'll be taking, which means then we'll start drawing from our federal grants, our formula grants, to cover those operating expenses. So we knew this day would come, CARES was going to run out, but we have definitely used it for quite a while and really gotten some great benefit from it. As a reminder, last month, Jason may have mentioned to you that our ARP funds were completely drawn in its entirety in the month of July. Also, I'll point out to you the lease revenue is a negative variance of about $11,000, and that's about 3 rows above that total revenue line. And that's because this is revenue from that was budgeted for a lease with Scissortail Park Foundation to lease the Union Station from COPA, because they had been a tenant of ours when we owned that building. That was put in our budget, but they are, of course, not tenants of ours anymore, so we will not be recognizing any revenue from a lease with them. And then under the expenditures section, I'll just highlight one item for you that you'll see that fuel expenses, which is certainly one of our high costs is 16% over budget, and that actually was largely due to our natural gas chargeback from the city. It's up about $23,000 from this time last year, and we all remember the winter storms that we had and the increase in cost to energy, so that's kind of the background on that expenditure. So if we flip over to page 4, this is our parking operations. I'll point out to you the total revenue line there is just over $1 million, which is 18% above our budget and a 21% increase from prior year. And this largely has to do with an increase in our monthly contracts revenue. So we had a 30% increase from prior year. We saw we had additional parkers. So the contracts, we had 121 monthly parkers at Century Center added in July, as well as adding 420 monthly parkers at the Prairie Surf Cox parking garage. So actual year-to-date expenditures were $661,000, which is 28% above our budget. So we are a little over the budget on our expenditures. Really, the storyline there is that we have a new provider, PCI. So there was a large deposit due at the beginning of that contract, $300,000 that you see there. And so that is a little bit over what we had budgeted for parking garage operations. However, we will get back on track with our parking garage operations expenditures. We're getting things finalized with our prior provider, with Republic. So we have a few crossover expenditures from our prior provider into this fiscal year. And then with the new provider coming online, there's just a few extra expenses there. And then we'll wrap this up with our streetcar operations on page 7. So the actual year-to-date revenue for streetcar was just over $1 million, 1.4% under budget. And the actual year-to-date expenditures is $595,000, which is 6% under budget. And our operating income is $429,000, which is about 6% above the budgeted amount overall. So just something to note on the revenues I'd point out to you is our advertising line item. That's the third row under revenues. You'll notice it's got a variance of negative $11,000. And so I thought I'd just share with you all the story on our advertising. So with sponsorships with the streetcar, when they kicked off in 2018, they were typically, most of them were a 3-year agreement. And so we're coming due with that this fall with those 3 years agreements coming to an expiration. And so we have a contract with Hauk to help us with getting those sponsorships. And so they have been able to renew some have elected not to renew. And so they are actively pursuing new sponsorships for those stations. That's a large part of our advertising revenue source. But they also have been working diligently on getting wraps for our streetcars, which is another source of revenue for the streetcar advertising. So we're still optimistic that we can regain some ground on our advertising this year. So those are my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by any of the trustees? All right, Suzanne, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second to, all in favor to receive our financial reports. All right, program reports. Looks like our first one is mobility management. Good morning.
Morning. How is everyone doing today? I do want to put out when we're getting started on the graphs that you're going to see throughout my presentation. Those are just our July and August of this current fiscal year. You do have in your program packet a detailed year-over-year ridership by program type, and I welcome any of you to email me with questions on those detailed year-over-year comparisons. Go ahead. So let's talk first about our senior services funded by area-wide and an Older Americans Act grant. You'll see that all of the locations are now open for the daily meal sites. That is the one area, those daily congregate meals, that we are still seeing some lower ridership from the pandemic. Congregate meals about a third of what it was prior to the pandemic. Those are large group meals, and so anytime the cases go up, individuals stop going. We are working closely with Oklahoma County Senior Nutrition that runs the sites to attempt to boost that ridership and do some additional outreach. The other one thing I wanted to point out to you is over under our medical, you'll notice on your detailed year-over-year comparison, a huge increase in those day services trips. So those are trips for us moving individuals to basically an adult daycare facility while their family works. Our provider that does that for us has been able to add some more vehicle fleets and capacities thanks to the generosity of their nonprofit board. And so we're able to do a lot more trips of that than we have in the past. One of the things that, if you'll recall, we do this every year in the spring and summer for our seniors across the city. We partner with Area-Wide and OG&E to deliver box fans to seniors. Our team, you can see here our team loading up the box fans for our driver here. A lot of families will come and pick them up, and we will also distribute the fans out to those congregate meal sites and help the seniors get them home. But for the homebound seniors, we actually deliver the fan to their house. So this is just that project. We have 25 already delivered. We did have a couple of individuals whose family decided to bring them up to the building and pick it up instead of us coming to them, just to have an outing out of the house, which we thought was really nice. Every year we do a survey on our senior transportation. Overall, from year-over-year comparison, our results were really, really close. The one thing that we saw a big difference in is we ask a question on how did you hear about our services. Normally that is, outreach is a very high part of that. Obviously, during COVID, we were not doing any in-person outreach, so that particular measure in the survey has changed quite dramatically. The biggest area of referrals during the pandemic was simply from family and friends. We have started in-person outreach on all of our programs now. We attended the Wellness Fiesta, the Latin Wellness Fiesta down on South Walker. We'll be at the Downtown Transit Center for the health fair, for the community health fair. And then we also have some things scheduled at North Park Mall and then moving into the fall as well to try to push our outreach a little bit more. We did get 63% response rate on this, which is outstanding for a survey. For any of you that know about survey methodology, getting 63% is huge. They were all very, very satisfied. We're still seeing over 60% of our seniors are using our services at least 3 times a week to move around our city, so we were very, very pleased with what we saw. Go ahead. I want to talk to you a little bit about Embark Well, because this is the program that we had that took the biggest hit during COVID. As you can see on the green bars on your graph here, that starts in July of 2019 when we piloted the program, and you can see ridership was doing really, really good until we get to March of 2020, and those green bars just disappear completely. That's because everything shut down. The next year, which are your gray bars, slowly started opening things back up. Ridership was still very low because seniors are still very nervous about going into a large open public area like that. But you'll notice that this year we're finally getting back in the game here, the purple bars. And in fact, a couple of months we've gone above what we were when we initially launched. So we have high hopes that ridership for Embark Well is going to be fully restored within just a few more months of outreach and things like that. We have expanded now, so we are serving all YMCA locations. We also expanded to all Oklahoma City Parks locations, provided that they offer some form of a wellness activity. And then, of course, we're supporting the MAPS 3 Senior Health and Wellness Centers, and we will start serving the other 2 as soon as they're opened up. Earlier you did, on the consent docket, you approved the grant for this program, the community development programs. Again, these are just July and August numbers. We are really excited about the program here. We got over 65 agency applications. We are actually on a waiting list because the need here is greater than the amount of funding we have to provide those free one-day bus passes. I'm going to be working with some of our partner agencies to see if they are willing to help us add some additional funding to this program so we can at least address those agencies that are on a waiting list for us. The other thing I wanted to point out to you is in 2023, our intent is to use some of the small planning budget that my division is given every year to look at our share fare program. That is our trip subsidy program for seniors. We lost our provider for that program back in 2019. It used to be what was called a taxi voucher program. That taxi voucher program was structured in a much more affordable way. The vouchers did not expire, so seniors were able to save them up and take longer, larger trips and still not have to have any out-of-pocket expenses. When we moved to the share fare model we have now with this a $4 trip subsidy, we're hearing from our seniors that are on an extremely low income that that's still not enough of a subsidy for them to utilize it, and we've seen the ridership just drop off completely. And so we realize that that's still a needed service, and so we're going to use some of those planning dollars to get some help at look at some alternatives, look at other agencies that have programs such as this and how they've structured them in the most affordable fashion so that we can truly make share fare a program that really benefits our seniors to take those trips that aren't covered under the other things we offer under older Americans. I wanted to mention this one again. This is our Unite Us referral program. I was fortunate enough to be asked to serve on the Central Advisory Council for Central Oklahoma for Unite Us to help expand the referral network. There are over 450 agencies now. This slide is out of date because she called me. She finally answered my text this morning with an updated number. So there are 450 agencies on there. We are able to make referrals that have nothing to do with transportation, and this is a huge need in our community and a huge service because it is a one-stop shop. They make one phone call, we fill out one form, and they're not calling 20, 30, 40 agencies for the same thing to try to see what help they can get. Another impetus in 2023 for our team is more outreach on this service. We've already spoken to victim services at the Oklahoma City Police Department to be sure that they knew we had this available to crime victims. I actually ran into Melinda from the Parks Department when I was walking in this morning, and I mentioned to her that I needed to connect with her community team so that they have this information if any individuals are coming to parks and need some assistance. So we're really going to try to work on that collaboration and making sure that everyone in the city knows about this program and that they can utilize it. This is our baby and our excitement, the Climb Ride program, working with child welfare. We just released the program report not too long ago. This program won the 2022 Innovation Award for Innovative Transit Programs from the Oklahoma Transit Association. We are currently talking with DHS about what maintaining this program will look like once the R&all grant runs out. What would expansion look like? How can we scale and replicate it? I've been working very closely with Jason on those things, and I'm sure we're going to move forward on some different things and start briefing some trustees on some options and see what you all think about that program. A little bit more about Climb. This is all the way through July of 2022. As you can see by the pie chart, the vast majority of Climb participants and their trips are for those visitations with their children. That is the key to success in family reunification in the child welfare system. More visits with the children in a safe environment, and it helps the family to reconnect with each other. Our Palomar program is doing really, really well. Many of you probably attended the groundbreaking for and the 5-year anniversary celebration for the new building on September 13th. We actually asked Palomar to come to our route supervisors meeting earlier this week to train our route supervisors on how to recognize the signs of domestic violence, how to speak to individuals, how to make referrals, how to offer that kind of assistance, because we want to be there for our employees. So far, we did 230 rides. August has been our highest month to date for Palomar trips. We are continuing, we discussed last time I was with you a little bit about what commingling of trips looks like. So what we are testing that between the Climb Ride program with child welfare and Palomar. So when the Palomar vehicle has empty seats, we don't use a subcontractor and spend money. We simply move the child welfare Climb Ride participant in the Palomar van, since a lot of the services cross over. A lot of those individuals are going to the same place. It's one of the big things that we're discussing with the Department of Human Services here in our community about how we can do more things like that, where we're commingling and truly making use of every seat in every vehicle so we can be the most efficient that we possibly can. And then the last thing I have to tell you about, and you don't have a slide for it, is last meeting, you all heard from Alan from Enterprise, and they are doing our Vanpool program. Wanted to let you know that that launch is going well. And starting with my December program report, we'll be adding an update on Vanpool and how many Vanpools we have and which companies we're expecting to be talking about in the next few months about Vanpool. So we're really looking forward to that. We do welcome any referrals from anyone that knows of entities that might be interested in doing some van pools for their employees. It's a really great thing for them to save money and offer a benefit to employees that can attract them during the hiring process. And that's all I have for you today, unless you have questions. Yes, sir.
Could you expand on the bus pass program and how that works?
Okay, so
You seem to have a lot of
Yes, there's much interest in it. So basically, it's a one-day bus pass. The reason that we work through the social service agencies is to verify income, because we don't have the internal staff bandwidth to handle that amount of paperwork and verification. So we partner with the agencies. They apply every year in the spring. We take a look at, who they're serving, what area are they in? Are they in substance abuse? Are they in domestic violence? And so, because we want to make sure we're providing passes to all areas of service need. And we just do it in the order that they're received, and we just continue to allocate passes. They tell us how many people we serve every year, and we try to give them as many as they ask for. Sometimes we are unable to do so because the need is great. And then they just come to our offices, pick up the bus passes, and then as individuals come into their facility to get services, those bus passes are distributed after they look at their income.
So we send the bus passes to the agencies to
Yes, sir.
distribute.
Yes, we have a whole system of control to keep track of who's got which passes and stuff, so. And they have some reporting requirements for us to help us keep track with the grant. Requires demographic information and reporting on who we're giving the passes to.
If you had more local match, you could have more, you have federal grant money to take care of the rest of it? There's not really federal funds for this that I haven't been able to locate yet.
We do have several private entities here in the city that are willing to partner together. We just have not gotten into that yet, into those deep discussions. They've been very high level at this point. This is a need. Let's talk about how we can meet it. And so I'm hopeful that I can find some private funding to do this, but if I can't, then we will have to probably look at some other options.
Okay, thank you.
My goal is always to find the money before I come tell you about it, so.
All right, any questions?
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Transit system report.
Good morning.
Morning.
How's everyone doing? Chairman, trustees. Sometimes there's perfect timing, and then there's today. So we just heard a report from Marilyn and everything that she's doing with the community. I wanted to take an opportunity to publicly recognize her real quick. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to read something real quick. So Marilyn was recently honored with the Lynn Legacy Community Champion Award. Right. So I want to read a quick description of what that award is, if you allow me. The Lynn Legacy Community Champion Award honors individuals and organizations who are visionary leaders committed to creating and sustaining healthy, hopeful communities devoted to those in great need, generous with time and resources, collaborative in spirit, and dedicated to creating a legacy that will last a lifetime. So back in September, Marilyn was recognized with that award, and I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you do and appreciate all your hard work. All right, thank you. So let's talk transit. Let's talk some ridership. So our first slide here is our fixed route system. Perfect. So this is our fixed route system, our average weekday ridership. You'll notice the blue bar there. That's our current fiscal year. We averaged 8,482 riders per day during the weekday. This is a 24% increase over August of 2021 and a 29% increase over August of 2020. So starting to see a trend here, right? So we're starting to see our fixed route services come back exactly how we anticipated that, we'd start seeing that increase as we come out of COVID and increase our service. Our next slide here is our fixed route weeknight ridership. Again, starting to see that increase coming back, right? So with our current month, August of 2022, we were at 400 average daily weeknight trips, 27% increase over August of 2021, and a 51% increase over August of 2020. Our next slide is our average daily ridership for Embark Plus. So we saw a slight decrease here, about a 3% decrease over last year, and steady for 2020, right? So again, we've talked about this before. If we see a slight decrease, we want to dig into it and figure out what's going on. So I was talking with Marilyn this morning, who manages our Plus system, and kind of trying to get into the details of why we're seeing a slight decrease. So what we found was that with COVID, right, a lot of agencies, as most places did, we had to pivot. And so a lot of places that we were providing trips to take people to their doctor's appointments, a lot of people went virtual, right? So a lot of virtual doctor's appointments and things like that. And so that's what we're seeing here. We're seeing that people are, instead of scheduling those trips to go see their doctor's appointments, they're doing those doctor's appointments virtual. So that's why we're starting to see that steady out. As always, we're always looking at ways to increase that service, and so we'll continue to do that. Our next slide is our streetcar ridership. So for the entire month, we saw 17,774 for the month of August. Our average daily ridership being 573 for the month of August. This is a 6% decrease over last year, and an increase 20% over 2020 with COVID, right? So I was talking to Joel this morning about why we are seeing that decrease over last year. And so as he was digging into the ridership, what we have found here is that as we were coming out of COVID, a lot of people were playing catch up with their public events, right? So we saw a huge increase of public events, trying to get people back out on the streets, going to these public events in 2021. Well, in 2022, everybody kind of went back to their normal schedule of those outdoor events and things like that. So that's why we are feeling we saw a slight decrease over the previous year in streetcar ridership. Did want to take a chance to show some appreciation with Joel and Corey, who are in the audience here with us. So last weekend we had the construction incident that happened downtown. This shut down the streetcar services, and just really want to say thank you to Corey and Joel, who were down here. So we had to shut down streetcar service for a few days. Immediately jumped into providing that bus bridge. Joel was actually out driving the van around the streetcar alignment, making sure we were still picking up customers and getting them where they needed to go. And also making sure that there was no damage to our streetcar track. So anytime something like that happens, our process is, the idea with, like, we want to get our service back out on the road, but before we do that, we want to make sure that we're operating a safe system, right? So there could possibly be damages that happen that you may not see on immediate inspection. But so what we do is we always go out and before we start service back, we do a track inspection, right? And so that is literally, we have a vehicle behind a person, and a person walks that track, right, and does a visual inspection on the entire 4.8 miles. And so we did that before we went back into service, opening Robinson back up. And then, of course, Corey doing what he does best and taking and maintaining our parking structures.
So Jesse, I do have a question about that. If you had to make an estimate of how many riders we lost from that disruption, what would be your best estimate?
Yeah, so it's a little tough, right? So what we do is, we'll look at the entire month of September and take an average. However, there was the lower park opening that was happening during that same time. So we did see an increase in pedestrian traffic downtown, which is also what drives our streetcar ridership. When we were looking at it, we anticipated that we lost probably close to about 1,200 to 1,300 riders on that Saturday, and then about 700 riders on that Sunday, and then we opened up later on Monday, or actually we opened up Tuesday morning, and so on that Monday we saw probably about 400 to 500 that we lost during that time. So close to about 3,000 in total. Okay. All right, our next slide here is our Smokies, right? So pretty substantial increase in our Smokies ridership there in August. So we saw a 71% increase over last year. We saw 575 total riders in August for our Smokies ridership. We contributed this to getting a majority of our e-bikes out there, right? So those pedal assist bikes that hopefully everybody's had a chance to ride. They're pretty intense, I'm telling you. Blow your hair back whenever you get that, when that motor kicks off. So it's a good time. So we anticipate that we'll continue to see this increase. Again, 575 total ridership in the month of August. Next slide is our river. Total ridership for the month of August on our river was 711. This is a 2% increase over last year. Again, good weather brings people out, and so we're happy to see that increase. So that should conclude our ridership discussion for transit. If it's okay with the trustee and the board, I'd like to go ahead and jump into BRT discussion.
Okay.
That's okay? All right. Nope, same presentation, just a couple more slides. Just keep going. There you go. One more. Perfect. All right, so let's talk about BRT construction. So as you've been out and assuming you've seen some of the BRT construction going on, so what we want to do is take a couple of pictures and show those to the trustees. So this is our Northwest Expressway and North Penn Avenue. This is looking back east toward I-44. This is our outbound or our northbound stop. So I'll answer the question that Chairman, you asked earlier. So the idea of putting the furnishings out on the BRT stops, so our railing, our shelter, benches, our pylons, ticket vending machines, and trash cans. So what we want to do is we want to wait, right? So we want to wait until closer, similar to what Jason was saying, we want to wait until closer to the end of construction. We don't want to put anything out there that could potentially get damaged before opening, and then we have to reorder anything, right? So we hold on that, and specifically like our pylon, I mean, that's close to a $30,000 piece of structure. Last thing we want to do is put it out there before we take ownership of the entire alignment. So, and also Rudy, our contractor, they maintain that liability all the way up to substantial completion and the handover to the agency, and so they also want to make sure that they maintain control of those stops. So we'll start seeing the installation of the station furnishings probably the summer of 2023, and then that will quickly lead into us bringing all those systems online. So the communication between the pylon and our buses, the ticket vending machines and things like that, the implementation of all those systems. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, so our next slide, so we'll go through a few slides here. So our next slide is our inbound or our southbound stop at Northwest 56th and Portland. This is looking south. So what I like about this stop is this is also a connection, right? So we've talked about those first and last miles. This connects to our MAPS 3 trail network that is in this area also. Our next slide shows our outbound or our northbound stop at Northwest Expressway in North Portland. This is looking west. So if you go by this stop, you'll notice that there's a lane pull-off for our BRT bus, right? So the idea here is to get the BRT bus out of the higher speed traffic on Northwest Expressway. And then this stop also has transit signal prioritization. So the idea is for the bus to be able to safely enter back into that higher speed traffic. We want to make sure we do that safely. So as the bus pulls into the stop and before this bus leaves this stop, the signal light back at Northwest Expressway in Portland will turn red, preventing traffic from turning westbound and traffic from going westbound, allowing the bus to enter back into traffic safely. So minimizing the traffic that the bus would have to interact with going back into Northwest Expressway. Next slide is at our inbound or outbound stop at Northwest 63rd and Meridian. So this is, talk about the couplet, right? So this shows both stops, our inbound and our outbound. So again, that idea being, if you use the BRT system to get to a certain stop, it's easily identifiable of what stop you should go to get back home, right? So visually you can see your stop to get back home. Our next slide shows that same inbound stop at Northwest 63rd and Meridian, just to kind of identify where that stop is. That's the 7-Eleven on the southeast corner there. And our next couple of slides actually show our end of the line or our park and ride at Northwest Expressway and Meridian. So here's the bus pull-off area at our end of the line or our park and ride at Northwest Expressway and Meridian looking south. The next slide also shows that same stop. All right, our next slide. So as always, we want to make sure that we are getting the info about our Northwest Rapid system out. And so this was at Ward 2 event where we brought our Rapid bus out to that event so we could showcase it. Again, it's a very beautiful bus, so it grabs your attention, had a tremendous turnout, and was able to show the cool new features of our Rapid bus. Our next slide is our kind of visually identify where we are in the project, right? So take a second to explain how our project is broken up. So our project, again, is locally funded and FTA funded, right? So essentially a 50-50 split. So our first project number here, MC-0619, that's our FTA funded part of the project, right? So this is our BRT stops and things like that. And then the MS-0123, it's an excellent project number, right? Easy to remember, is our local match funded projects, right? So those are like our sidewalk projects that are within 3/4 of a mile of the BRT alignment, or our bike projects that are within 1 mile of the alignment, right? So specifically, this is sidewalks along Classen Boulevard. And so we're about 3% complete with those. And then the next one there is our WC, that's our waterline betterment project. So of course, most projects, you tackle the things that are underground first before you start putting platforms on top of it. So that's why you see that this is about 28% complete. And then our total project, we're showing about 9% complete, but I do want to throw in a caveat here that this is based off of our first pay app from our contractor, which is about 30 days old. So obviously, you've seen more station stops being completed, and it feels like we're further along because we actually are. But this is just a good way to represent work that's actually completed by the contractor by showing these percentages based off that pay app. So with that, that wraps up the, okay. So that wraps up the BRT information. Be happy to take any questions. Yes, sir.
On that 63rd Street picture that you showed, there was the old bus stop. Will it be removed? Did you say
Yeah.
that? I
Yeah,
didn't
absolutely.
catch it.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about our BRT platforms is that they are built to not only allow for the BRT bus to arrive and boarding and alighting, but also our fixed route buses, right? So all of our new fixed route buses will have the same suspension system, so they'll have that same level boarding. But just in case we're not able to use one of our newer buses at one of those platforms, we also have an area at the base of the platform that allows for our older fixed route buses that have the lower for boarding. We have an area built into the BRT platforms for those fixed route bus systems also. Yep.
Is 63rd Meridian our only park and ride?
No. So we have a park and ride at the end of the line at Northwest Expressway and Meridian. We're working out agreements with a park and ride at Northwest Expressway and Penn, right? So with the Oak Development area. So we're working on a park and ride location there. And then, our Century parking garage, that'll be our south end of the line park and ride location. So our Century garage is essentially right across the street from our Main and Broadway BRT stop that'll be built.
So you said 63rd, or Penn and where that new development, Penn and
And then Main and
Northwest
Broadway.
Expressway
Yeah, so we'll have 3 park and
on
ride
the,
locations.
on the southwest corner?
What
Yeah.
was it again?
The
Sorry.
southwest corner where that new development is.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I would now have a motion to receive our program reports.
Waiting.
His isn't showing anything. You want to vote?
Yes, I'll vote aye in favor. I assume the motion passed, I don't see.
The motion passed.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, any items from the trustees prior to adjournment?
I did just want to ask a follow-up question about the Century Center garage. Corey, did we verify that there were no damages from the construction accident to the Century Center garage?
Yes, we had 2 separate independent structural engineers come in, sorry. One that we used our on-call contractor to come in, and then Lingo, the general contractor. They brought someone in.
Okay.
The damages to the garage are just plain and simple superficial. Couple scratches, couple pieces of caulking that came loose from the spandrels, and staff being creative and collecting revenue by diverting all of our traffic over to the Prairie Surf Media Garage, or formerly known as the Cox Garage.
Okay, thank you.
It went very well.
Has the Channel 9's construction of their floor completed, or?
It's really close. Their corporate staff started moving in.
Oh, have they?
So the expansion joint replacement the project that I'm working on above is making a little bit of noise to keep them dry downstairs, but it's going well.
Yeah. Well, the Channel 4 manager asked me one day at lunch if I charged them triple for that space. And I said, well, if you wanted me to, I would have. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments, kind of going along with some of the questions that have been asked about ridership or revenue loss with the construction accident. Staff is preparing a claim. We do plan to submit a claim for any lost revenue or damages. I believe we did have, although we didn't have any damage to our track and the streetcar is operational, we do believe we had some damage to one of our track drains. So we'll be submitting that claim, and optimistically, hopefully we'll get reimbursed, but we are doing our due diligence on that end. The other thing I wanted to just recognize, Lisa started off with a presentation about Union Station and mentioned the staff moving over, and I just wanted to publicly recognize those staff that did move over for Union Station. They've really been great about moving into their new accommodations. As Lisa mentioned, some of them are in cubicles in an old storage room, so they've kind of downgraded from an office to a cubicle. But what I think is encouraging, and I think for all of us around South May, is just looking forward to the future and the renovation of that building and the space design that we're space planning and design we're working on, and looking forward to bringing to the trust. And then finally, I know the board has inquired about a regular updates from the RTA, and so I just have a couple of bullet points of information to share with you about what the RTA has been accomplishing. One is the RTA continues to work on that east-west, or I should say east corridor, connecting downtown to Tinker. And really where the RTA is at is the board has narrowed it down to two potential alignments, or corridors, ways to get out to Tinker. One is basically looking at Shields to 29th, 29th all the way to Tinker, using Douglas as the way to potentially enter or connect to the base. The other alignment is coming out of downtown, imagine Reno to Eastern South, which of course would connect to the FAM and the Ocana development. Also a school there, Crooked Oak School, down to 29th, and then 29th again to Douglas. So, the board has narrowed it down to two alignments, and we'll plan to have that final alignment determined this fiscal year. Again, it's an opportunity to recognize our city's planning department. They're part of the technical work group that the RTA consultants are consulting with, as well as our own internal staff, and then staff, of course, from Edmond and Norman with the north-south corridor. And then Tinker's also been heavily involved and have invited RTA consultants to several meetings related to their own transportation planning efforts out there. So the East Corridor continues to move on. Similar story with the north-south corridor, although it's, as you recall, it's further along. The alignment and the mode has been determined. It will obviously be commuter rail and using the BNSF railroad right-of-way. Currently, what is occurring now is just really negotiations and discussions between the RTA and BNSF. You know, if you think about it, the RTA consultants have come up with options to say, hey, these are capital improvements that could be made to the BNSF system to allow for this commuter rail, basically building or buying capacity, if you will, because we can't negatively impact their freight operations. And so then the BNSF consultants are using some modeling, and they'll come up with their own recommendations, right? Well, actually, we need this instead of this for, you know, reasons that serve our freight system. And as you can imagine, as negotiations go, we'll end up with something that, you know, both parties can support. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's going to be ongoing over the next year. And then finally, the RTA did issue a request for proposal for consultants to assist with studying the next two corridors, if you will. Corridor to the west, serving far west Oklahoma City, potentially Yukon as well, and then a corridor to the airport. That RFP has been issued. We're meeting as a selection committee on October 19th to do a pre-proposal conference. And so that work is moving along as well. So that concludes my update on the RTA.
Maybe this is a little touchy subject, but what Moore and Dell City pulled out?
Yeah, Moore, Midwest City, and Dell
Midwest.
City have all withdrawn
Has
from
there
the
been any
RTA.
discussion, once this is up and running and being successful, and all of a sudden they want back in?
Yeah, the trust indenture that forms the RTA does allow for annexation. So since they're no longer in, if they wanted to join, they would be annexed, if you will, into the RTA. And there would be potentially there would be some sort of buy-in, you know, to get back into the RTA as a voting member. Now, I want to clarify that because there could be other communities down the line that, you know, weren't originally part of the RTA. Maybe they don't have interest in being a voting member, but they would sure like some service. And there's other mechanisms, primarily contracts with those other cities to provide service without necessarily having to have, you know, a buy-in.
So they wouldn't have to have a buy-in to get service?
It would depend on the service they wanted, and really if they wanted to be a voting member. Yeah.
So there has been some discussion on,
They haven't really indicated, hey, well, I should take that back. All the three cities that withdrew from the RTA have indicated they're very supportive of the RTA's efforts. They're very supportive of enhancing public transit in the region. So I think there probably is some potential, you know, that they could reach back out. I don't know that they publicly said that. But, you know, I think for those three cities in particular, probably the primary hang-up, if you will, was just the fact that the only funding mechanism that the state law allows is sales tax to fund the RTA. And those communities, like Oklahoma City, you know, I mean, there's lots of demands for that sales tax. And I believe just when they look at their priorities, maybe at this time the RTA wasn't as a priority as some other potential competing needs for those potential future sales tax dollars.
have any of the cities talked about raising the sales tax a little bit to fund this?
Well, you know, eventually the remaining cities, of course, the three, Edmond, Oklahoma City, and Norman, would have to likely raise sales tax to fund it. And it would come to a vote of the RTA district.
Well, I was just curious, there been any discussion about these other cities getting back in and what the ramifications of it would be, or the penalties, or?
Yep, it's all outlined and specified in the trust indenture. There is a mechanism, but, you know, whether or not it's cost prohibitive is yet to be determined.
All right, any other questions by any of the trustees?